Now be recorded.
Really appreciate if all of you can switch their cameras off and keep your mic switched off as well throughout this webinar, because it will prevent any clutter and noise from happening, and you will be able to listen to all of the speakers very clearly. Formally kickstart with this morning's webinar. As you can see in our poster presentation, that this is going to be on CV writing and interview skills for doctors. It is going to be of benefit for everyone, but particularly the focus has been junior doctors, specifically the SHO and registrar level doctors who are trying to compete for the very competitive positions with the basic specialist training as well as higher specialist training. So we have been able to gather together eminent scholars and physicians in their own right to give you advice on these issues, and you will have very fruitful 2 hours uh, coming up. So I'm just going to ask Zubair to switch to the next slide, please. This is an overview of the program today. We have divided the whole webinar into two sections. The first section is going to be on the CV writing mainly, and the second section is going to be on interview skills and related subjects. So the first presentation, as I said, is going to be by my friend and colleague, Dr. Khalid Khan. Dr. Khalid Khan is an orthopedic surgeon. He's also the founder, president of Irish Pakistani Professionals Association, which is an association uh, recently formed, and he will introduce that to you. I will hand over the mic to Dr. Khalid Sarwar Khan, please.
I'm Khalid Khan. As Dr. Maksud has told you, I'm orthopedic consultant, but I'll just tell you something about Irish Pakistani Professional Association. So the aims and object of Irish Pakistani Professional Association is to highlight the achievement of Irish Pakistani professionals and their contribution to Irish society. It also provides professional guidance and professional support to our young generation and help integrate the Pakistani and Irish community, keeping their culture, values, and identity. It supports the community welfare activities, and we have events we have done in the last year we'll discuss later on. So for Irish Pakistani Professional Association is mostly doctors, 85% members of are doctors, but we believe in inclusion, and to make an organization, I don't have any information anywhere else in the world. They have included all professionals like IT consultants, accountants, engineers, solicitor, business managers, and others on one platform. And today's event is the reflection of that cooperation. For operational purpose, we have divided the IPA into IPPA-Med for doctors and other healthcare professionals, and this event is under their care, and IPA Tech for ICT, engineering, and the rest of the professionals. I just briefly mentioned some of the recent events we have done, like we did in cyberbullying 13 September, HPAD guidance 28th August, and career guidance for professionals IT in July. And we had big plans for March, April, but we all know, unfortunately, the COVID crisis was at peak, and we changed our activities from career guidance and other big activities for young generation to support our community in Ireland and at large in the world, especially as we belong to Pakistan. We did some help in Pakistan. So we did, I'll share with you some pictures now, what we did in recent events. So this is a HPAD program we did on 22nd August. As some people might not be aware, HPAD is a very important exam to get admission in medicine in Ireland, and it was very well taken. And this, the feedback reflects nearly 98% of excellent and very good, and the same for the usefulness of this program. We also did a cyberbullying webinar, which is an important thing, especially for young adults and for parents, and was very successful. In July, as I mentioned, there was a program for IPA Tech for the people interested in ICT. It was very well taken, and we organized on the request of Pakistan Embassy, and they were also collaborating in this event. And it was very helpful, and we got very positive feedback on that. As I mentioned, the COVID crisis, we didn't sit idle. We just contributed by planning. We planned for donation. We didn't collect donation from people. In fact, the executive committee paid from your pocket and did whatever we can do. And we also provide the platform for all information regarding COVID to the community. And we set up helpline. If you see on the right side, there's a leaflet we have publicized, and there were helpline for people who need any support in that time, for like a student needing any support, any account related or legal related or anything else. And below are some pictures of, we provide the PPEs in Multan and some rations in different parts of Pakistan. This is the first Hatchpad webinar, not webinar, the event which we did, and the students from different Trinity, RCSI, and UCD, they are all belong to IPA families. They conducted this webinar, this event. It was very successful and very well taken. There was nearly 70 participants from all the community, including Pakistani, Irish, and other communities. And the success rate was reflected that we got a lot of thanks now. Most of the students who attended this scored high and got admission in medicine. This is also community support event for legal will and inheritance. And we had invited two Irish speakers, Mr. Roddy Tyrrell and Jerry McMahon, and with some aspect from the community, and it was very, very important, and people felt the importance of will and inheritance, and message was much appreciated. We also do some family events, like this is last summer's IPA family members family event, and everybody enjoyed, and we were looking forward this year, but unfortunately COVID didn't permit us. Hopefully we'll do soon. This is the inauguration on 23rd of March 2019 when the first event came, and it was very successful, and we had our guest from UK, Apne guest, as you see lower down, the executive committee, President Ahmed Burney and rest of the members. And they were very impressed with the Irish dancing and tried to learn the Irish dancing steps, like you can see on the right-hand picture. So just in short, we are here to provide support to the young professional, but we are as a support for the community in general. Coming back to our main topic, why we decided to have a webinar on this interview skills and CV. We all know that this is very important aspect, no matter how good you are, but unless you are shortlisted, you may not get chance to work in a good hospital or good training system. And some of the doctors lack the ability to make good CV or present their talents and skills to impress. And unfortunately, no matter how good they are, how knowledgeable they need guidance. In particular, the doctors who are coming from different health system to Ireland, they should be aware of what are the things the consultants or the interviewers looking to hire good doctors. So that this is all about it. And I strongly request to please listen carefully. All these speakers have a very wide experience, and you may not get this chance again. Just just learn from their things and just listen them carefully. It will help you guide long way in your life. I'll finish here. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Khalid. As you rightly said, the right advice at the right time is the key to success. And that is the whole purpose of this webinar, that at this juncture in their career, we provide them with guidance from the experts. So it's a pleasure to invite now my other colleague and friend who is from the UK. He is a consultant urological surgeon, and he has been a president of one of the organizations of the alumni of a medical school in Karachi, and he's life member of APNE, Mr. Shabi Ahmed. So we will invite Mr. Shabi Ahmed to share his views and opinions on CV writing skills.
Thank you very much, Khalid and Dr. Anwar. Thank you, IPPA, for giving me the opportunity. Now, what I will be talking about the CV is pretty much what David has already said. There will be a lot of duplication. However, there will be a bit more British aspect to what we like to see in the CVs, and what exactly a CV is, and how we design it, and how that translates into filling your application form. Because mind you, in the United Kingdom, all the application process, be it for training or non-training jobs, is all online. So you might be able to attach your CV in the end of the application. However, CV just itself is not the sole criteria or the sole document that will lead you for towards a shortlisting or an interview or an appointment for a job. So I quickly want to just tell you, because this is a question I've been asked repeatedly over the last 18 years, that what is the difference between a resume and a CV? Now, CV is a Latin is a for the full form of CV is curriculum vitae, which is a Latin word, which means course of life. And what it technically means, or what it professionally means, that someone has to put all their academic work, all their professional work in a single document, so that the person who's reading the document would know what this person's life is all about, what his professional accumulations is all about. So it looks into your qualifications, it looks into your clinical governance work, your audits, your publications, your research, and your experience. It is very different from a resume, which is a sole 1 to 2 page document which only tells you about your qualification and your previous experience, which might be fine for other specialities or professions, like David was mentioning about the Harvard MBAs. But in medical world, it is the criteria are slightly different. So again, I would focus more towards the UK side of things, that we do prefer a detailed CV. It doesn't need to be 20 pages or 30 pages. A SHO CV, what we start with is 3, 4, 5 pages. That is absolutely fine. And as you work towards your experience and finish your basic training and then your core training and your foundation program and so on, then you accumulate enough. So by the time you move towards the completion of your training and towards a consultant job, you've got enough to show that you have worked in the last 10 years towards getting to the position where you are pointable or reasonably applicable to be confirmed as a surgeon, as a consultant. Now, before you, I'm not going to repeat what David had already said about construction of the CV, but when you are filling an application form, and naturally you've put all your uh, details into your CV, your qualifications, your audits, research, publications, your previous experience. But before you apply for any particular job, please be sure that this job is the right one for you. Do not blindly apply for each and every job, because that is only something which is going to uh, dishearten you if you're not successful in those attempts. Read the essential criteria. That's very important. You need to tick box all the essential criteria before somebody will take your application form seriously. And the more desirable criteria you tick, your application will be more stronger. So therefore, read the application and compare it with your CV before you proceed with any application. Now, junior doctors are applying for many specialties: medicine, anesthesia, psychiatry. So there is no harm, or there is no concern that you can have more than one CV for different specialties. But please make sure that those relevant bits for the particular specialty for which your CV is designed is highlighted for that specialty. So if you've done an audit in for anesthesia, if you've done attachment in psychiatry, those things need to be highlighted in the CV for that particular specialty. So first, the assessor who's looking into that CV is aware that this particular applicant is genuinely interested in that specialty. He or she has done some work in that specialty to show their interest, and would be a better candidate than the other 2 or 3 applicants who have not done that. So make yourself sellable, make yourself marketable, and this is your opportunity to do that. These are the sections which you need to fill in your CV, and it doesn't need to be in any particular order. I've just simply written the basic stuff. But mind you, when you write for qualifications, passing the PLAB or passing the IELTS is not classified as a qualification. Yes, your basic medical degree, your your any masters or any diplomas which you have done, your membership exams, these are your relevant qualifications. So don't put IELTS and don't put PLAB or don't put OET, because it really only occupies space and is not much of professional interest to the assessor. Audits, very important. Now, when you are filling in your application process, audits have got each audit has got markings to it, and especially if you have completed an audit loop, it gives you added marks. Same goes with presentation. International presentations give you more points as compared to local or national presentations. Now, there are lots of people from Ireland who have uh, taken up training positions in United Kingdom now, be it at the core training level or higher surgical training level, having spent their years in Republic of Ireland previously. They would tell you that these presentations and audits and publications each have got their significant relevance when you are filling in your application. And if you don't do that appropriately, you will be marked down and you will lose on the opportunity of an appointment. So, therefore, these things are very important. Likewise, the clinical courses which you do, but again, emphasizing the point that the relevant ones need to be highlighted. So if somebody is doing a, pursuing a career in surgery, things like ATLS, basic surgical skills, CRISP course, these are the relevant items. However, ALS, although definitely a good course, but might not be very relevant to a surgical specialty. Your teaching experience and your past experience. And again, chronology is very important because you have to highlight your current post, what you have done previously. If there have been any gaps in your CV, you need to have a relevant explanation for that. And there is no harm in writing a couple of lines in your CV saying that you took 6 months time off for whatever reason, and clarify it. Your life is just not your academics. Your life is something more outside the medical world. So it's very important to highlight your extracurricular activities, because at the end of the day, we are looking to appoint a colleague, a human being. We don't want to hire a machine, a robot. So therefore, please highlight your achievements in other sectors of life as well. And lastly, I would say that you need to mention three CVs and preferably local CVs, references, sorry, local referees. And we've I've seen lots of CVs in which they say references to be provided on request. Do not, I repeat, do not put that. It is a big turn off. This is does not reflect professionalism at all. Put your three CVs. If you don't have local referees in your CV, then anyone from back home will do, as long as you've got a contactable address, an email address, a phone number, and so on. But do provide the details of the referee, please. A few do's and don'ts. Again, repeating what my earlier presenters was saying, avoid large paragraphs. Put bold highlights and headlines. Be very careful in the English grammar that you use, and avoid spelling mistakes. Please avoid spelling mistakes, because it reflects extremely negatively to see a CV in which the language and the grammar is not appropriate. Ask your colleagues to review the CV for you, show it to different consultants. They will guide you. Get it checked. Avoid short forms. Don't write ATLS. Write the whole form of it. And a lot of junior doctors put a whole long list of what procedures they can do. Again, it only occupies space. It does not show much clinical relevance. If I'm appointing a registrar, I would know that he or she has got the relevant skills and expertise to do all the basic works. And the if you am appointing an SHO, they would have a similar criteria. So you don't need to write that you can do IV cannulation and put an NG tube and etc. etc. So please dispense with that. Next, please. So in conclusion, whatever you put in your CV, be honest about it. Do not put irrelevant and wrong facts. Do not ask your friend to uh, share a few audits with you so that you can have something to put in, because sooner or later these issues are picked up and highlighted, and it is a big clinical governance problems. And I know a lot of junior doctors who have landed up into big trouble and even been reported to the General Medical Council because of plagiarism and dishonest activities leading to their application process. So don't make life difficult for yourself. If you don't have anything relevant to put in terms of your publications or your audits and things, just be honest. Just say that I will work towards it, but at the moment I don't have it. So j- just be be what you are. Don't try to emulate anyone. Don't try to follow the bandwagon, but be honest and be truthful. So these are a few website links in order for to help you with regards to the application process. Uh, there is a different links for surgery and medicine and anesthesiology and pediatrics. And thank you, Khalid, for providing me with these details. With regards to the United Kingdom, uh, the NHS Jobs by far is the most valid portal in which you get most of the jobs. At least more than 95% of the jobs are advertised on the NHS Jobs. There are few other portals as well. The different specialities have got different portals as well. However, when you are going into those specialities, you will be able to find the relevant details for it. What happens is all these specialty jobs are mentioned in NHS Jobs as well. You might not be able to apply on those jobs through the NHS Jobs. However, a link is provided there. So your main focus of attention would be the NHS Jobs. And uh, one thing I would mention in the NHS Jobs is that yes, you have to fill different sections of it and take it up from pick it up from your CV and copy paste it. But in the NHS Jobs portal, you do have to provide a personal statement for it. So just beware that if you are applying for a psychiatry job, your personal statement should not talk about your guidance or career goals to be an endocrinologist or a gastroenterologist, and vice versa. If you are going for a gastroenterology job, it doesn't say that you've spent the last 3 years of your life working in psychiatry. So be careful of what you put in your application. So in conclusion, what you put in your application form is what is going to get you shortlisted. And it is not a personal like or dislike for any assessor. If you put in the right sections, if you put in your uh, fill in the aspects of your audits and your research and your publications and your courses, as I said, each one carries marks to it. If you tick box all the right aspects for it, you will get the maximum marks, and there is no reason why you cannot be shortlisted. So it is a very professional, it is a very organized way. But your job when you're doing these, you're forming your CV and transferring your information from the CV into your application, is to diligently fill in all the relevant bits in the application process so that you can capitalize as much as possible for it. And these are just a few links to help you with your personal statement. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity, and I'll be happy to answer some of your questions in the chat box. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shabi Ahmed. It was very extensive account. And so let's switch gear now. And we have spoken to the experts. We thought when we were preparing for this webinar that showing a real life example of people who have been successful recently, especially coming from abroad, would be a great inspiration to the rest of our colleagues. So to do that, we are thankful to two of our senior SPRs to share their experience briefly. The first one is Mr. Adil Zafar. He's a senior vascular SPR currently based in Beaumont Hospital. And over to you, Adil.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to present. Trying to keep this short, but getting started is half the battle. Learn where you want to apply the job and figure things out. This does take time, so take your time to get ready, get your CV ready, get your application ready. Think of the field that you want to apply in. Try to go work in that field. Make very good references. You can't expect the references in Pakistan to work for you here. You have to meet the requirements. So make sure you look at all the requirements at the application at the start of your job so that you can focus on the things that you need to get done, and obviously ask for help. It's always gives you ideas and it gives you a better answer from things that you don't know. People have experience and you can learn from it. Giving yourself time is very, very important. Have a plan, talk to your seniors, and map out a route. I wanted to do vascular, so I made sure that I worked in 2 different vascular units. I presented at national and vascular conferences. I presented at vascular meetings, and I made sure the consultants knew that I was interested in vascular, and this is a career that I wanted to pursue. You have to look at your application and try to fill every section. People make the mistake at looking at the application at the end of the job. Look at it at the start of the job and look at the boxes you need to fill and make sure you tick all those boxes. Talk to your consultants. You'll always have an opportunity there to do something, and you can take that opportunity as you go along. In your application, organize yourself, take your time, read through the application twice before you even think of filling it. Have electronic copies of everything. It is always helpful. And I spoke to SPRs, consultants, and senior colleagues, and I showed them all my application before I submitted it. Now give them time to go through it as well. You can't expect them to go through it immediately and give you feedback. Email it to them, ask them. You might even have to pester them, but they will give you feedback, and it's all useful. Once you're shortlisted, this is a foot in the door. The next hurdle is the interview, and a lot of the panel will go through it here as well. I'll just go through my experience of it. I had to interview twice for the SPR post. The first time I treated an interview like a Viva. I literally just answered the questions and did nothing more than that. In the second attempt, I took 6 weeks. I spoke to all my colleagues. I took a lot of courses, and then I prepared for the interview. So I'll give you a few examples of what differences I saw. In the first interview, when I was asked about an audit, I literally answered an audit is a quality assessment tool to allow you to compare a task to the best practice guidelines. The next interview, my answer was an audit is a quality assessment tool that allows you to compare a task with the best practice guidelines. I myself have been involved in 3 audits, 2 of which I've completed the loop and helped streamline my process. This showed the panel that I knew what I was talking about. It showed them that I had done audits and I understood what it was. Another example was about training courses. In the first interview, I said it was an excellent resource and helps reduce learning curves and obtain key skills. In the next one, in my second interview, I said during my job at a busy hospital, I took the time to take part in 3 training courses and events. Each time I helped obtain new skills and improve my understanding, which allowed me to improve my day-to-day task. So in summary, I believe training courses are an excellent resource. I will continue to make time for them and essential for my development. This shows that you're committed to training courses, you understand their benefit, and you show the panel that you know what you're talking about. Knowledge, now this is not bookish knowledge. You need to know about the job. You need to know about what you're applying for. You should know who's on the panel before you go in, know their names. Cover all the hot topics. You will get asked about COVID if you apply for a job now. You might get asked about bed shortages, and you might asked about increasing the interest in surgery. And there is no excuse for not knowing your CV in detail. If you've written something in your CV, you have to know about it. You can get asked about a paper that you've done ages ago, but you have to know about it. Research, find some old candidates that have applied for the same job, ask them the question that they got asked and make a template for you. You don't have to stick to the script, but it gives you a better idea of constructing an answer, and see where you can fit in a bit about yourself. And the last thing is always practice. So you need to practice with a mirror, record your voice, record a video, practice with colleagues, practice with consultants. Practice, practice, practice as much as you can. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Adil. Thank you for sharing your experience and insight into the interview process and CV writing. Um, so our next participant is Mustafa Mahmood. He's another example of a person who came from abroad uh, into the system. He was new, but he worked very hard and ended up getting onto the higher training program in an emergency medicine. He has completed his CSCST and now he's a post CSC fellow in emergency medicine, falls and syncope in St. James's Hospital. He's going to share his experience of his journey with you. So over to Mustafa now.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. A lot has been said about how to, prepare for your interviews, prepare for your CV. All I'm going to focus you is I'm going to tell you how from 2014 to now I started and what steps that I take to get me where I am. And just for the audience, I still don't hold an Irish passport. So the myth that if you're not an Irish person, that you cannot get a training scheme, that's absolutely wrong. I came to Ireland in March 2014. I started as a registrar in emergency medicine, University Hospital Galway. In July 2016, I was taken on onto the higher specialist training program in emergency medicine. So within 2 years and 3 months, I got onto the SPR scheme. And then, as soon as I finished my SPR scheme, I was given an opportunity for a fellowship in St. James's Hospital. It's a novel fellowship in emergency medicine, falls, and syncope. And how did I get through all this? I'll tell you all in my journey in the next slide. So when I came in Ireland, I made it a point that I will get onto this training scheme no matter what. I spoke to my colleagues, spoke to my trainees, spoke to my senior SPRs and consultants, and made a plan. In September 2014, I wrote my Part A of the membership exam. In October 2014, I wrote ATLS. I was given an instructor potential in my ATLS, but I was told that I couldn't get the instructor course because I was not a trainee. I got through that. I'll tell you later on. In January, I wrote the second part of my membership. In July 2015, I failed the third part of my membership. Then, to improve upon, I looked at the answers that I failed on, and that was all pediatrics and APLS. So in October, then I wrote APLS. In November, I wrote the level 1 ultrasound accreditation. And in December 2015, I wrote my membership exam. So within the scope of 1 year, I did my membership. Along with that, I attended 3 international conferences. I attended ISIM in South Africa. I attended USIM in 2015 in Italy, and IAM in Cork. And not just attended, I had posters and oral presentations in those 3 presentations in the research that I'd done in last little bit in Ireland, nothing from Pakistan. So between March 2014 and March 2016, I did 7 audits. I did 3 publications. I presented at 4 posters. My non-clinical was that I did 1 QI project, which as a service registrar, you're not supposed to do. I wasn't supposed to do, there was no obligation, but I did it because I wanted to improve my CV. I actively got involved in undergraduate and CST teaching, so core trainee teaching. I took on the job that other senior SPRs did not wanted to do. I took on their jobs, and I just built my CV on basis of them. In November 2014, because I couldn't get on an instructor course in Ireland, I paid quite a lot of money to go to UK to get an instructor course in APLS, an instructor course in ATLS. So that is how, before my interview, I was an instructor in ATLS, I was an instructor in APLS. And then in December 2015, I wrote the ASTEM application. In March 2015, I appeared in the ASTEM interviews. So ASTEM is Advanced Specialty Training in Emergency Medicine. And the next day, I was told that I was successful in advanced training, getting on an SPR post in March 2015. So let me tell you about the cost that was involved in those 2 years. So I spent, and I'm not exaggerating, between 17,000 and 20,000 euros to build up my CV on various courses on exam preparation, boarding and lodging. Did I do any holidays? I did not. Did I go back home in that time? I did not. The number of non-clinical hours that I spent at my workplace, I don't know. But the writing of sims, organizing teaching, organizing rosters, a lot of the stuff that other trainees thought that they wouldn't like to do, I take that on just because I wanted to build upon my CV. Did I buy any fancy cars or phones? No, I did not. And what this all helped me was to gain trust and mentorship of my consultants for them to help me through the process there onwards. So, and a lot of random unwanted advice that you all need to delete. I was told this was a racist system. I was told that you're wasting your time. I was told you should go to UK. I was told that there is no place for training schemes here in Ireland for us. I was told that you've been only here in Ireland for 2 years. You can't get on a training scheme. And a colleague of mine, when I applied for the interview, there was 65 euros fees for the application. He said, "Oh, what a waste of 65 euros." I proved them all wrong. Then when I got onto the SPR post, I did 4 QI projects in last 4 years. You're only supposed to do one. I wrote all my exams before my other peers. I actively instructed on any course that I could. I founded the FRChem Mocks Ireland, which is a free course for EM trainees in Ireland. I actively got involved in training the emergency staff, the pre-hospital staff in Ireland. I founded, along with sim centers in Galway, the first simulation championship amongst the hospitals in Ireland. I became an active advisor on training issues to Irish Emergency Medicine Training Association. And I also did lots of QIPs, and my QIP got into the new NOCA QIP Awards. And that is how, before finishing my SPR rotation, I was offered a fellowship job in St. James's Hospital. So did I have any failures? Loads of them. I failed my MRK MOSCI. I asked my consultants to train, and they helped me. If you ask them, they'll always help you. There's no one here, particularly in Ireland. If you go to them for help, they'll always be there. I wasn't able to get ATLS instructor course here or GIC instructor course here. I paid to go to UK and get it all done there because I wanted to do it. Initially, my ASTEM application was rejected because I did not fill it up properly. I went to the consultants, I went back to RCSI. I literally went on my knees and they accepted my application again. When I went for the ASTEM interview, when I looked at the number of candidates that were there were 17 candidates, there were 8 training posts, and my name was the only non-Irish name on the interview panel. When I was on my way home in the bus, while going back to Galway, I was applying to all British training jobs. And a lot of my critical care applications were rejected as well. So my take-home message on the next slide would be, so spend money on your CV. That's the most important thing that you can do. Gain your consultant's trust. If they trust you, if they vouch for you, there is no stopping. Remember that your nurses, your ward staff, your juniors, your interns, they are your references. You have to be kind. You have to be kind to your juniors. You have to be kind to your peers, your colleagues, everyone. Make sure, as Adil said, you need to tick all the boxes in the application. And all the people who give you negative vibes about what you should and shouldn't do, just delete them. And make sure that where there's a will, there's a way. And if you can prove that you're the best, there is no stopping, whether it's Irish, British, or Pakistani, or any other system. If you know what you're going to do, there's no stopping. That's my take-home message for you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mustafa, for the inspiring talk. I'm just going to invite my colleague and friend, Dr. Amir Niazi now, who is a consultant psychiatrist. He has spent several years as clinical director, and now he has moved on to a more national role. So I would like to ask Amir if you can switch your camera on and to share your experience about CV writing and recruitment of NCHDs in general, because I know you have had extensive experience, especially dealing with the people coming from Pakistan.
Thank you, Dr. Maksud. No, I think people who are listening to this webinar probably are very lucky because the information they have got this morning from all the speakers, I think if I had that knowledge at the time when I was going through this process, I would have done much better. So I have to say that all the speech webinar participants have been very honest in their guidance, what they have guided to our junior doctors. The only thing which I will say is that I think in Ireland and in UK, in most specialities now, things are getting very structured. Even at the interviews, they are probably asking similar questions unless and until you are going for a particular job. So in your CV, when I see the CV, especially from Pakistani doctors, uh, there are areas which I can say that they don't work very hard on. There is a structured way of shortlisting. There are certain marks which are given to your clinical knowledge and your clinical expertise. There are marks which are located for your management experience, your research and audit, and your teaching. To give you an example, let's say if out of 100 marks, you have 25 marks for each area, even if you have extensive clinical experience, you will only get 25 out of 25. And if you have done no research, no audit, nothing, you will get zero. I know certain colleagues who said, I have so much experience, I wasn't even shortlisted. Somebody who might not have the same clinical experience might get shortlisted because he has worked on all aspects of his CV. He has worked on his teaching aspects, on his research audit, on the management. Clinical is not only the area where you need to focus on. I think it's very important that your CV need to have a balance, and that reflects when you are getting shortlisted. As David said earlier on, there are times when not only the consultants but even the admin do the shortlisting, and they are given a structured format how to do it. So they have no idea of your clinical. They want to see that if you are filling something in your research audit in that section also. So I think anybody who is planning, who is applying for the post, need to find a balance in their CV also, rather than focusing on one area. You might everything in clinical aspects, but that is not good enough to get you over the line.
Okay, so we'll start our next session. As you all know, I'm Khalid Khan, and this section is for interview skills, and it's a very important section, and we have excellent speakers who has wide experience in this uh, interview skills and recruitment and training schemes, and also have wide experience on dealing with a lot of foreign doctors. So they have a lot to offer, and their advice is very, very important. To please listen and note down the points that will help in your life. So to start with, I'll invite my first honorable speaker, is Professor Peter Gillen. He's a consultant surgeon, and he's a professor in RCSI and advisor to the National Healthcare Communication Program. And Professor Gillen has a lot of contribution to RCSI and developing different system for Ireland. I'll hand over to you, Professor.
Thank you very much, Khalid, and thank you to IPPA for the opportunity of speaking here today. It's been a very enjoyable morning so far. I hope to get through my talk on time so that we can answer any questions if that's necessary. First slide. So I'm going to speak a little bit generically about interviews, not so much about specific training schemes, but about generic interview techniques. The first thing I want to say is that you need to prepare yourself. So before an important interview, it's very important that you try and swap out of an on-call rota for at least 24 hours so that you're well rested. If the interview is in the morning, eat something healthy on that morning. You don't want a dip in blood sugar during an interview. Familiarize yourself with the interview location. This may not always be as simple as it sounds, and sometimes traffic, rush hour traffic may delay you, especially if it's an early morning interview. So be familiar, know how long it's going to take you to get there, and plan yourself so that you get there well rested and in no great rush. Try not, on the other hand, to be too early, because if you're too early and you're sitting around other candidates, that can be a little bit off-putting. Now, it's very important to get as much information about the job as you can beforehand from the position that's advertised, and to be aware of the role and the structure of the job within the department. It's very depressing when people would arrive for interview and, for example, I might say, do you know how many surgeons we have in this department? Or do you know how we divide up emergency rotas in this department? And someone says, no. Do you know that we have an elective site and an emergency site? No. So it means that you haven't been very interested in the job beforehand to actually find out a little bit about it. And as everybody said already this morning, read your CV again, because it's important. If you've written something down, no matter what it is, it's game to be asked. And remember, as Amir said, the further on you go in your career, interviews are very structured. So a panel of interviews will be done by a number of people who will decide before you come in what sections they're going to take. So, for example, I could be given CV. Now, I will ask questions about the CV. Somebody else could get management or leadership, and they will confine themselves to those questions. And as Amir said, now at senior level, the questions tend to be standardized. So each candidate would be asked the same question by this interview panel in order to make the best and composite response, and the best person is appointed. At more junior interviews, this is not as structured, and so you can be asked a variety of different questions. Now, at the interview, look and act the part. Appear professional and behave professionally. First impressions really do matter. Psychologists tell us that we make our minds up about people within milliseconds now of seeing them. So if you are shabbily dressed or unkempt, then it does not create a good impression. The further on you go in medicine, the more you'll understand that at the top it is a very conservative institution. So please be respectful and appear professional. Be open and friendly. Be confident. If you've been shortlisted, you deserve to be there, and that's an important point for your own confidence. If there are several interviewers on a panel, address your replies to the person who's asked you the question. But for example, if there are multiple panelists, then try to scan the room as you're speaking in order to appear inclusive. But stay focused on the person who's asked you the main question. If the interviewers have name badges or name plates in front of them, then try to use them at specific points. So you might say, well, thank you, Professor, for asking me about that. That gives me the opportunity to say, etc., etc. Be aware of your nonverbal communication, how you sit, and for example, when you're interested in something, we tend to lean towards the camera like I'm doing now. So try and give the impression that you're interested, that as somebody is asking you sometimes quite a long question, that you're nodding like this to say that you're following, and answer the question. Please avoid giving a lecture in response. Now, the key thing to remember about an interview, no matter what stage of an interview it is, you should have written down yourself beforehand the 5 strongest features that you have in your CV and your experience to date in order to help you get this job. And you must try and include those 5 things at some point in your interview. Now, don't bluff. If you don't know a question, then apologize or ask to move on. If you don't understand a question, please say so and ask, could it be repeated or rephrased? Sometimes nuances may escape you, particularly if English is not your primary language, and therefore it is always useful to ask for something to be rephrased, because you might get an indication of what the actual question is more about the second time around. Now, the most common question that any interview will encompass begins with, why do you want this job? Or why should we appoint you to this position? So you need to have your answer well thought out beforehand. Now, that question, although simple, can be a nightmare for some people to answer. And I would suggest that the best way to answer this, particularly if it's a more senior position, like Mustafa going for the emergency medicine training program at higher specialist level, I bet Mustafa answered that by saying, I feel I've got all the attributes to show you that I should be appointed for this interview. And I hope over the course of the coming 15 to 20 minutes that I will be able to highlight to you those attributes to make you convinced that I will get this job. That gives you an opportunity to say that, no, I'm not going to tell you in 1 or 2 sentences why I should get the job, because there's more to me than that. And if you give me an opportunity, I'll explain those points to you and I will convince you of my suitability for the appointment. Now, be prepared for some tricky or difficult questions. So ask a colleague to look at your CV beforehand and pick out the weaknesses so you can practice your answers. Very often, particularly for overseas doctors coming into the Irish system new, research may be an Achilles heel. So if you don't have research, then probably, as Mustafa said, try and get involved in it as quickly as you can. Or, for example, say that you have plans to do a quality improvement or an audit project and you realize the importance of it. I would suggest that you come across as a good team player. Be enthusiastic. You can't wait to start. You're looking forward to learning what this job is going to be able to teach you, and nothing is too much trouble. That's the impression that you want to give at an interview. If you're asked about something controversial in the interview, particularly as you go on in your career, try to show a balanced viewpoint rather than choosing one definite side, which has the propensity on occasion to alienate one or more on the panel. So, for example, if you're asked a controversial topic, unless you're completely and 100% committed to it, it's probably best to say, well, thank you, I can see that that's a really difficult question, and there's two sides to this. On the one hand, there's such and such, but on the other, there's this. Now, some interviewers will chase you and say, yes, but what's your opinion? At which point, having given both sides of the story, you can then nail your colours to the mast, as it were, and give your opinion. But what you want to come across as is a balanced, well-read individual who can see both sides of the story and is not there to be a very opinionated person who has the ability then, if given a post afterwards, to be quite difficult to get on with, because they have fixed and rigid views. Also, it's worthwhile to have an answer ready for what will you do if you don't get this position. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't intend to appoint you. What they might be trying to do is, are you just going to throw in the towel and give up and say, oh my goodness, I didn't get the SPR first time around, and I'm never going to go again, I'm not good enough. We want to see, by asking a question like that, what your resolve is. So I'm quite sure that Mustafa didn't decide, well, I didn't get the exam the first time round, so I'll never get the exam. Far from it. He just knuckled down and did far better the next time and made sure he was successful. And that's what I want you to do, that you'll say, I would be very disappointed if I didn't get this position. And obviously I would look for feedback to see how I might improve my performance after the interview. So I'd hope to speak to some of the panel or perhaps the HR person who will give me some feedback. That way I can improve myself for the next time around. You're demonstrating now that you're willing to take feedback, that you're listening to where you had shortcomings. You intend to work on them to improve them. And a setback is not going to make you throw in the towel and give up your career. Finally, we're going to talk about closing the interview. Now, there's a couple of little tips here. At the end, you're more than likely to be asked, usually by the chairman of the interview board, if you'd like to add anything before the close of the interview. Now, a word of caution here. First of all, the less said by you at this point, the better overall. But if you haven't already got the 5 points about yourself out, maybe you're short 1 point, you didn't get to tell them about your quality improvement project from your last job and the fact that it got published. That's your opportunity to go back and to say that. Other than that, try and keep it pretty short. Avoid questions about terms and conditions of employment. They have no place at the interview. That's a HR issue. So, for example, I've had people look at me and say, do you pay unrostered overtime in this job? Now, that's a perfectly valid question. It's highly important. It has no place, however, at the interview table. It should be known beforehand, and if not, it's directed to HR, not to the interview panel. It just creates a poor impression. Otherwise, say very little, but thank the panel for their time and interest in you. And a short summary about, I hope I've been able to demonstrate the skills and the enthusiasm that I'll bring to this position if I'm appointed. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter. It was excellent talk and experience sharing, and it should help the juniors who wanted to apply, and even the senior who want to apply for the consultant post. And you rightly said preparation is important, and interview is more structured now, so we have to score points. And also, your point is very valid. That first impression is make a difference, and you should dress professionally. Now, I will go to the next presenter. Can you just somebody put the next presenter slides up, please? Thanks. So our next presenter has loads of experience. Dr. Jane Lydon. He's a consultant gastroenterologist and general physician in Mater Hospital, University Hospital, Dublin. And he was involved in National Specialty Director, HST Gastroenterology Recruitment, and now a national lead in endoscopy quality improvement program. So I'll hand over to Dr. Jane Lydon. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and thank you for asking me to talk today to the IPPA. I'm specific. Peter sort of talked about very much about the interview, more general interview process issues. I'm going to focus on the higher specialist training interview. Obviously, I can only talk about my experience with the gastroenterology program, but it's a pretty standardized interview across all the specialties. So for our specialty, there are 10 training places on the SBR scheme every year. And the majority of the training schemes in HST are dual training, so it's general medicine and a specialty. And it's a 5-year combined training program. So 1 year GIM and 4 years gastroenterology. There is an option for 1 year out of the program to do for gastroenterology credit, and a lot of people will do research and that formal research such as an MD or PhD, but obviously you only get 1 year credit, or they may do a fellowship abroad in their last year. So the important thing about that people need to know ahead of applying to the HST is that sometimes there are fixed rotations. Each specialty is a bit different, but in gastroenterology now we have 3 years fixed rotations, the first 3 years, and you will be allocated. You'll be asked to list the post you might like to do. General internal medicine is part of the 3 years, and you cannot do research in the first 3 years. So these are sort of RCPI rules, and they're generally across the specialties. And to my knowledge, they are currently still the rules this year. So these are the important dates you need to remember. The application process is October, November. It's an online application. Shortlisting will occur in December, and the interview will be in February. Now, these dates have moved backwards a little bit. They used to be a little bit later, but they've moved backwards to allow people and hospitals time to allocate people to posts and have an idea of manpower. These are the only open dates that these things happen in a year. So if you miss them, there isn't another one till the following year. So the application process, I'd advise you all to look at the RCPI website. Obviously, you must have completed BST or equivalent before you apply. You may not have your certificate, but you should have completed all the relevant rotations and courses. You don't need to have your membership at the time of the application or shortlisting. There are 2 standard reference forms that have to be filled out by a consultant you've worked with. And as I said, the application is online, so you won't be submitting a CV as such straight away on that. It's not, as the earlier speaker said, it's not just CV based. There are specific online forms and applications that have to be filled in. So the shortlisting, the interview panel is usually arranged year on year. There'll be some variation, but generally speaking, the 2 national specialty directors are on the panel. You'll have 6 gastroenterology consultants from around the country, only 1 representative from any one hospital, and there'll be a representative from general internal medicine. Now, this may be a gastroenterologist who does general medicine as well, but they'll generally be on a general internal medicine committee in the College of Physicians. And then the chairperson, who tends to be somebody who is retired, maybe a retired surgeon or physician, and they are totally independent. There'll also be an RCPI administrator involved, who looks after the all the paperwork and the application process. So all members of the interview panel will be involved in the shortlisting. And obviously we go by the application form and the RCPI criteria. So this is a snapshot of the 2019 shortlisting criteria. This is for gastroenterology. Other specialties may adjust. If you look at the marking, they may give different points or different weighting to these areas in terms of what they feel is appropriate, but the domains, the 5 categories, are the same. So if you look at its professional qualification, education, and achievements, obviously your undergraduate performance, things like teaching awards, higher degrees, other professional and extracurricular achievements, clinical practice, which would be your exposure to the specialty, the rotations you've done over time, where you've worked, and you can see publication and audit experience. In gastroenterology, there's quite a lot of points awarded for that, and I'll talk about that again later. Leadership and management. Obviously, at the time of the higher specialist training, you can have SHOs and registrars, people at different levels. So it's what you could have attained at that stage in your training. But we do like to see things like people took on the lead NCHD role, or they organized rotas, or they organized some other thing in their time, either undergraduate or postgraduate training. And then teaching experience, excuse me, you can see that it's quite a low mark. And the reason we do that is that every interview I've ever done, everyone tells the interview panel that they love teaching. So teaching is a hard thing sometimes to delve into. So we tend to not give a huge amount of marks in our interview process, but I'll talk about it a bit later on. It can be things like having a teaching qualification or formal recognition as part of a university, that would go into your professional qualifications and maybe clinical practice segment, so you can get points in other areas. But just simply saying I love teaching and I teach interns and SHOs doesn't get you very much. So the interviews, then we have 15 to 20 interviewees for 10 places. The 5 standard topics or areas covered in the interview, as Peter sort of mentioned, would be CV, career to date, research and audit. There will be a gastroenterology specific topic, and this will not be a clinical problem like in how do you manage ascites, or it'll be more about what is a big issue facing the specialty. Then there'll be a general medicine topic, which tends to be about the interface of general medicine with the specialty. And obviously things like COVID now and managing waiting lists and things like that may come up on our beds. Then there will be a management or a professional performance question. And this can be about how you deal with a difficult colleague, or issues about patient care. And everybody gets asked the same 5 questions, not necessarily by the same person on the panel, but everyone gets asked the same 5 questions. And again, this is the scoring system for 2019, and you can see that CV and sort of gets 25 marks. Management skills, which can sort of reflect your clinical experience to date as well, 20 marks. Research and audit 20, overall general medicine area 20, and overall, which is a sort of what the general feeling of the panel is about your suitability, would be 20 marks. And these can change a little bit day to day, year to year. So at the time of interview, you must have your membership. If you don't have your membership at the time of interview, you will not be interviewed. And each interviewee is given a score by each panel member, and then scores are collated at the end And usually the scores are given to the top, the posts are awarded to the top 10 if you have 10 posts to allocate. Important considerations and things to think about, and some of the speakers have talked about this already, but one of the big issues that we notice, and it comes up in our shortlisting, but also in our interview, is career progression, in particular at registrar level. So the things we focus on, if you've been in Ireland for 4 or 5 years and you stayed in the one post in the one hospital, or in, and then you decide to apply for the SPR after 4 or 5 years, that doesn't indicate that you've sort of thought about your career, that you've tried to get more experience, that you've thought about where you're going. So it is, and it's difficult when you're coming from overseas. You know, you need to get bedded in, get a job, but think about your specialty. You know, we often get people who've done endocrinology for a year, general medicine and geriatrics, and then 6 months of gastro, and then they went into a general medicine post again, and then they applied for the SPR, and it doesn't look like you've really thought, or you've planned out where you're going. The other thing is to be, has the candidate applied before? If you've applied before and been successful, that shows you're interested. But there are, I suppose, the one caveat there's a limit to the amount of applications you can make to the HST. I think it's 3. And I said, have you been slow to apply? Have you had your membership and met all the criteria, but spent 7 years in registrar posts and didn't apply for the SPR? Again, the question is, why did you not do that? Other important things that and some of the speakers talked about this, I would say, is that posters, meeting abstracts, at least at a national meeting like the Irish Society of Gastroenterology, they're very important. And the focus on the clinical, while it is the main thing, you're there trying to learn this specialty, to become an expert in this specialty, but you have to focus on the other aspects, like the management, the education, the academic. And a lot of people have done lots of clinical work, but very little audit and research and presentations. And unfortunately, on the day, that they sometimes get marked down, not marked down, but there are other people who've done a lot more. And again, courses, if they're relevant courses to gastroenterology, in my case, that all looks good. One of the other issues that I think people sometimes underestimate is you're applying to become to train in a specialty. The chances are you're going to be asked about something very topical or challenging in that specialty at your interview, and you'd be surprised how many times people have only been focusing on the clinical work and have no idea of the bigger picture. And one of the issues, say, for us is, how do you manage waiting times? How do you have 70,000 people potentially going to be on an endoscopy waiting list? And the amount of times you get an answer that is really intern level answer, where no, somebody hasn't even thought about this. So really think about, talk to your peers, talk to your consultants, say, what are the big challenges facing what's the most topical thing in the specialty, or facing the specialty, and have an idea about what's going on in the HSC as well. What are the challenges, like COVID, winter, how are we going to the expanding waiting lists? And then, as Professor Gillen said, how do your answer, you can come up with, if you're asked for an answer, how do you, so you don't have to be too hard on one side or the other, but it's a good idea to have some opinion as to how things might be addressed. And lastly, I would say, anticipate the questions at all levels. You should have 2 or 3 things you want to say for any question you're asked. And talk to people who've done the HST before, talk to consultants and say, okay, what am I likely to get asked? If I'm asked this, what should I say? And these are things that some people don't think about. They think, oh, I've done all my clinical work and I focus on getting experience in this area. And they leave these other important areas. So that would be my advice on the HST process.
That's excellent, Dan. You give very good details of the interview shortlisting criteria and interview process, and that give candidates a lot of insight how to build and prepare for interview. And as you mentioned, career progression is very important. The same advice I got it. and it worked for me. I'm now inviting my next speaker, who's Mr. Asghar Nawaz. Next slide, please. And he's a consultant cardiothoracic surgeon and robot and transplant specialist in Mater Hospital, University Hospital, Dublin. Over to you, Mr. Asghar Nawaz, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I've been trained in the UK, although I'm currently based in Dublin, and we included this talk into this whole scenario so that people who are interested to go to the UK should also benefit as well. So generally, you need to know a few things before you apply for the specialty training, okay? And you need to have done some background research, and that determines basically what your interest is. And also look at the number of the training opportunities, the training numbers available. And there are certain specialities which are very, very competitive. Say, for example, like cardiothoracic surgery, there are only 10 to 13 national training numbers which we advertise in the UK every year. So look at your chances as well, and then match yourself with this person's specification according to your documentation and according to your previous experience. The applications are, the training numbers are advertised well in advance. So look at the timeline, look at your eligibility. And obviously you should be aiming for the national selection, but if you are unsuccessful for one or the other reason, there are other opportunities like locum appointment through specialty training, as well as there is another new program introduced called the VAST training, widening access to specialty training. So the UK have a cascadable model. Basically, the specialty advertisement comes out in October. This gets advertised in NHS Jobs as well as in the Deanery websites. And then you put your applications through the online system. You get longlisted. If you don't get longlisted, then you're given feedback. Why have you not been longlisted? If you're successful, then the next phase is to shortlisting and interviews, following which, if you're successful, you get offers. The people who make until the interview and don't get the job, they do get a formal feedback at the end, which tells them how much did they score, what their rank was against the other candidates, and what was the minimum selection criteria, so that they can improve their portfolio for the next round. And also, it is a very fair and open system. Actually, every individual can check their eligibilities because this person's specification is advertised, as I said, in the jobs in NHS Jobs, as well as in the Deanery, which is monitoring the selection. Every specialty is monitored by a different Deanery. And there are certain things which you are expected to have, like for specialty training, you need to have the core competencies along with the foundation competencies. But if you're applying for the core selection training like CT1 or 2, then obviously you need to have obtained the foundation competencies and have the documentation ready. The other things which you also need to have, especially the overseas doctors, is that you should have your English language in the form of IELTS or some other certificates. You should have what your visa status is, and it is better to have your GMC registration beforehand. Some of these specialities need you to have done some exams like MRCP or MRCS, and this may not be requirement for the other specialities. But if you have done it, it is an advantage. The applications go through the online system, which is called the Oriel Online Application System. There are some generic things which you fill in, and you can actually then apply to the different specialities. So the basic information remains the same. It is an advantage that you save some time. But then whichever program you're applying to, you need to have specific information. And always when you have filled the application form, before submission, you should go through it, read through it very carefully for the accuracies as well as the spelling mistakes. Because if your application form doesn't read well, you won't score high. And every candidate then gets longlisted based on that form. So the next stage, if you get shortlisted, will be the interview. For the interview, you will have time in advance for the preparation, but I would advise you to prepare well in advance, because you should aim for the interview. Somehow, if you're unlucky and if you don't get shortlisted, that's a different thing. But remember, this thing takes a long time to get ready and have your preparation, because you may need to do some courses, you need to get some documentation done. Now, I'll tell you a few tips later on how the interview is and what the scoring structure is for the interview. So your assessment is done on both aspects, and they have both have equal weightage. So you will be assessed for the clinical skills and then non-clinical skills. So the clinical skills is there will be a station for the a scenario given where we will be testing your clinical knowledge relevant to the specialty. And although not for every specialty, but for some specialties, especially the surgical specialty, you may be asked, or you may have a station called surgical skills station, where you may be given a task like suturing or laparoscopic skills or thoracoscopic skills. So expect that and be ready to have done some simulation courses so you do perform well on the day. The non-clinical skills, they have, as I said, equal weightage as well. So pay full attention to these. And most of our trainees who are especially from overseas, they score less in this part. Communication and presentation is very important. And also then is your academic part. And the academic part would include your audits, research, clinical governance, teaching and training. So what happens on the day in the UK specialty training system? So there are different stations, and you would ideally be given beforehand the structure of what is going to happen, and you basically keep on rotating around different stations, and you will be told about the time slots, what you will be doing in that particular part of the day. Generally, it would include a portfolio station, then a presentation station, then a structured interview station, clinical scenarios, a communication station, and a skills station. But as I said before, skills station usually is only part of the surgical specialties. Now, on the day, this used to be that they used to have a specific station for the portfolio station, and you will go through the portfolio with an examiner. But sometimes what they do is they get the portfolio on the day from you, and there are 2 or 3 examiners who actually on their own go and check your portfolio for the evidence which you have to confirm the evidence which you have put in your application status. So it is variable, but you should really give time to make your portfolio ready and have the content arranged. Give it to some seniors so they can look through it. Have a content page, put your CV in it, and put your other documents, important relevant documents, and especially the courses and publications in it, and know how your portfolio has been arranged. So if you have a portfolio station, then you are the first person to know what is where. So you should be able to go through with the examiner if you're asked to. And they will, as my other colleagues have already told you, whatever you have in the portfolio or in your CV, you will be asked specifically for that, and you're expected to answer and know that. Now, some of the specialties, like for GP recruitment, usually portfolio is not required. But you can get further guidance on this matter from the either Health Education England or the deanery, like for the cardiothoracic, the Wessex deanery who monitors the selection process. Or you can also check the individual Royal College's website, and they give you the idea of what happens on the day. So basically the same thing which I have already told you, but as Professor has already told you, know your strength, know those 5 points, and know your weaknesses also. And definitely no lies. Don't try to put something which you think may score you, and then you either have not done it or you've done lied it, and then your career will be screwed. Now, some specialties, they ask you to do a 5 to 10 minutes presentation. You may either be given the topic beforehand. That means you can rehearse it very well, you can practice it, you can make your slides, and you can ask one of your senior colleague to go through it and maybe just present them. Some other specialties recruitment, they give you topic on the day. They give you 10-15 minutes to make it ready, and then they ask you to go through. So check what the requirement of that particular specialty is, and accordingly make your presentation ready. But there are certain things you need to know. You need to know about your topic, whatever you are going to talk, whether it was already given or whether you have been given on the day, and stick to the time. Very important. Plan your structure of the presentation and make it easy for the audience or for the examiners to take the message from your presentation, because they are assessing your confidence, they're assessing how you can speak and whether you can present yourself very well and deliver what you have been asked to do. So for the structured interview, you will have time for each question. The set of the examiner usually is the same. The candidates keep on rotating around different stations, and all of you get asked the same question. That question may be about yourself, that question may be about this specialty, or it may be a generic question. But you need to be able to answer the question very well. How you handle the question, how much knowledge you have about what you have been asked for, and how you phrase your answer, it is very important. Because the answer might be the same, but your approach will be different, and that's how you're going to score your points. So look on the person specification, look onto the GMC general medical guidance paper which they have published, and use the buzzwords. They are very important. Like if it's a clinical scenario or some other management or priority scenario, you need to tell something about the patient safety. So well rehearsed and have done some courses or sitting with the seniors is very important. Clinical scenarios, usually, as I said, they may be asking for the diagnostic skill, the treatment, management, and also it is not only the knowledge, but also how you manage them, like prioritization. And we know that you are juniors, so if you are stuck or if decision making is difficult, you should be able to seek help from the seniors, and there are always seniors available to help you. In communication skills, it may be the patients, it may be actors, it may be patient relatives. And in this station, they're assessing your communication skills. So, and also the active listening skills and how you behave with the patients and their relatives. Are you an empathetic person, which means that you are able to put yourself in the patient's shoes? And also use the simple wording. Don't use the medical terminology when you're speaking to patient or the relative. For the UK selection, as I said, there are different deaneries which monitor, and you need to look individual deanery website for further information. The Health of England education website is on the display. You should look on this, and it gives you all the information which I have presented to you here. GMC website is another important source, and also is the BMJ carriers. But importantly, for every specialty, go and check your Royal College websites. And I would advise our juniors who are coming from the overseas to have done some specific courses. This is very important step in your career. So be prepared. Rather than failing 4 or 5 times, there are different professional organizations who help you prepare for these interviews. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Asghar. It was excellent detail. talk about the process of application, interview, training system in UK, and especially with the structured training system in UK. Now we'll move on, and I'll invite now our next speaker. That is Mr. Assam Ishtaq. He's a consultant general and GI and vascular surgeon, and most of you know him. He was ex-president of IMO, Irish Medical Organization, has a lot of work under his belt, and he's been a very active person for junior doctor support, and I think I'll share his views now.
Thank you very much, Khalid, for a very generous introduction. I'm going to be very, very brief because I gather we are running a little bit late. So you might be wondering what's the relevance of my talk with communication and leadership skills. So basically anybody who is building a career as a doctor, so it's a ladder. So you start as intern, you become SHO, registrar, SPR, and consultant. So the points I want to give you to the audience are very, very valid at every point in your career, even after you become a consultant. So take simple thing in your medical career, starting from even as a medical student, all the way until you retire are the 3 C's, okay? And that's going to be communication, communication, and communication, okay? Most of the communication we do is with our patients. And remember, being a doctor and allowed to treat patients at any stage in your career is a tremendous privilege. This privilege is earned by obtaining a medical degree, by obtaining a job. However, remember, there's lots of terminology currently being used for patients in the healthcare system. Service user, customer, client, no. Patient supersedes everything. So please remember, they see you in a position of power, they trust you, and you must communicate with them appropriately. Also, in any person, any doctor's work, in daily, you communicate with your colleagues. And colleagues around you have multiple skill sets, multiple grades. So therefore, you will be communicating with your senior medical colleagues, junior medical colleagues, nursing colleagues, paramedical colleagues, and so on and so forth. So all those skills are terribly important. And then important next, which you heard from the previous speakers, is actually communication with the profession. And what I mean by that is publishing research, making presentations, going to conferences, meetings, and even something like what we are doing today. So if you want to build a career, it's nice to have a good CV, but you need to have other abilities which will be very, very relevant for your career progression. So please remember the 3 C's. These are terribly important. And then another simple 3 P's, okay? This will get you everywhere. It will open every door for you. So you've got to be polite, you got to be pleasant, you got to be professional. These are very big words, okay? You and I as doctors, we go through different training stages. People, you might have been on a shift for 24 hours or 36 hours. You might have had a very, very long day and you're seeing somebody at 3 o'clock in the morning next to emergency. You still have to remain polite. Being polite is no sign of weakness. It's not, it's rather a strength of a very competent and a professional person. Being pleasant. It can be challenging if you have done 48 hours of on call. It can be challenging, you are in a very, very busy accident emergency department at 3 o'clock in the morning, but you don't have much choice. Remember, you are in a position of authority, you are in a position of leadership and seniority, and you must remain pleasant at all times, not only with your patients, but with your colleagues. Now, some juniors may learn some bad habits by watching their seniors who may misbehave. Those days are thankfully rapidly disappearing. So please do not pick up the bad habits of what you may see. Try to learn from the bad habits, try to understand that why somebody lost their rag or whatever happened, it's not acceptable anymore. We must remain pleasant. And then all these two together is called being professional. And being professional does not mean that you are accepting other people's, but professionalism simply means, a simple definition of professionalism is doing the right thing at the right time for the right reasons. And as doctors, we must uphold that right from the internship, SHO grade, registrar, consultants, and then very senior grades as professors and heads of the department. So communication with patients, as I said at the beginning, there are significant challenges, okay? It's very easy to be very pleasant and nice on Monday morning. It's very difficult to have, after a long weekend, to be able to do it. Time available to you. Remember, there are pressures all of the time. Clinics running late, theaters too busy, accident emergency department heaving with patients. Time is always made. Try to be productive, try to be efficient, try to find time and utilize time appropriately. Because most errors, most complaints, most incidents happen when you have condition in which there is lack of time. And I use a simple thing in teaching people in terms of clinical errors and risk management. It's called HALT, H-A-L-T. When you are hungry, angry, late, and tired. These are the 4 danger zones when you make an error, make a mistake, or cause any particular clinical incidents leading for a complaint against you. The environment. Environment is terribly important. Look at around ourselves. We are all very nicely, comfortably sitting in our rooms, studies, offices, making these presentations. Now, imagine in this very room where I'm sitting right now talking to you, put 5 people around me, give it a busy A&E department and environment, your performance drops. There is a very simple concept in airline industry which we must adopt in operating theaters. It's called the sterile cockpit environment. And that is, at crucial times in a flight, at takeoff and landing, nobody can gain access to the cockpit. But how many times somebody has a clamp on the aorta and phone starts ringing, people coming in and out. So environment where you work, be it wards, be it clinics, be it crowded A&E and operating rooms, are also important. So if you are communicating with patients, you want to make sure that you have them in an appropriate environment. Try not to talk to patients about cancer, deaths, and serious illnesses in corridors. It may not be possible to have meeting rooms available all the time, but you've got to do your best to achieve that. Okay. Phone calls. Another simple little tip for all of you. Phone calls. You don't know who's on the other side of the phone. So when you're communicating with a relative or with a patient over the phone, you want to be able to establish their true identity. It doesn't take much. We are right now, due to COVID, in the era of telemedicine. So when you ring somebody, politely ask them, could you please tell me your date of birth? Just confirmation and all. So these are the danger zones which you want to be aware. So communication with patients is terribly important. Again, communication with work colleagues. If you want to have smooth career progression, you need to be able to have very good interpersonal skills. Medicine is no different than any other profession. It has rather more challenges than the others. And again, you need to work as a problem solver. You need to be seen as a problem solver, and you need to behave as a problem solver, not as a problem creators. The previous speakers have given you very, very good examples about what traits the interviewers are looking for. So therefore, try to learn. None of us is perfect. We all make errors. We all make mistakes. So apply the 3 things, polite, pleasant, and professional, in your interaction with your colleagues, both junior and senior. Because remember, when you progress in your career, your junior colleagues are going to look up to you and they need to learn from you. You need to provide appropriate leadership to them and appropriate guidance and all. And that's what you can see what's happening today as well. So it's very, very important. And remember, work colleagues, not just medical colleagues, these are nursing colleagues, these are theater porters, it is the catering staff and all. So what you really need to do and make an effort and improve yourself by doing, and that is, how do you work with colleagues? There is going to be conflicts, there are going to be crosswords, all sorts of things. But remember, if it's not you only under pressure, everybody else also could be under pressure. So try to put yourself in a way, say, oh, if somebody didn't answer my phone properly or somebody was nasty to me and not, no. Take a breath, stop and rethink, and that should help you with your career. Communication with the profession, I briefly touched. It's terribly important for career progression. Previous speakers have highlighted this for you because look, we are basically in a very competitive environment. Okay? So you start as a medical student, there are thousands of them, then there are thousands of trainees, and then eventually you get to the next level and next level. So the best way for that is you presentations, publications, because it's a competitive entry and a competitive selection process. So you need to be able to produce, to work around in all these areas. You need to be able to show your strengths. And what these things mean is that you are committed to that subspecialism, and you're a team player, and you're able to provide and you carry out what you in terms of research and teaching and training. Teaching and training is extremely important. Remember, it does not have to be a formal tutorial in which you should be able to teach your junior colleagues almost every hour when you're at work. And the same goes for the senior colleagues. None of us, when we enter into medicine, knew everything. And it was thanks to our senior colleagues, patients, and not only that, remember, you can learn a lot from your other colleagues, i.e. nursing colleagues, paramedical staff, and all of that, okay? So learning is lifelong. I'm so fortunate and glad that every day I learn something new. So the day you go home, you need to ask yourself, what new things I learned? And it doesn't matter where do you learn from. So communication with the profession is extremely important. It's a lifelong. So leadership skills, okay. We're all leaders in our way. Look at your own home. One of your parents will always be the one everybody goes to, okay? Then you were in the school, then you were in the secondary school, then you came to medical school. What leadership means is try to lead by example, okay? And you lead by problem solving. When you're working in a team in a hospital, no matter what your grade is, you have a role to play. And your job for the team is to make sure that your domain is well looked after. Of course, you may come across, oh, I went to radiology and they don't allow me to book a CT scan. Fine, try to find a solution. Why they refuse to book a CT scan from an internal SHO. So you have to learn to adapt, to be able to show that you have problem-solving skills. It's already been touched by before, compassion. We as doctors and specialists and all of that have enormous power in by virtue of our role. However, we need to be always doing the right thing at the right time for the right reasons. Yes, if there are difficulties, there will be problems, okay? But you need to remain compassionate, right? You may be annoyed, you may be angry, you may have suffered any injustice. No, you need to let it go. Tomorrow morning is going to be a new day. It's a new beginning. You also need to, if you're in a leadership role, i.e. as a registrar, a senior registrar, as a consultant, well, you need to work by consensus, okay? None of us knows everything. None of us is perfect. So when you're in that position, you're working towards own clinical progression and career progression as well, but you need to learn. And it's no harm for a consultant. It's usually the junior and middle grade consultants who don't want to listen to the intern. No, you've got to listen to all your team members, even encourage medical students to tell you what it is, okay? So you need to develop these leadership skills, and you start developing as an intern because you're teaching the medical students. You start developing at SHO level, at the registrar level, and then on to the consultant level, then as head of department, then a chair in a faculty. So it's lifelong skill. So you must do your very best to develop it. And thank you very much. Any questions, we'll take it through the forum or at the net.
Thanks very much, Asim. It's an excellent and people might be wondering why we asked you. Leadership and communication skill is very important, which we are looking for in our junior doctors and in future consultants, and they have to show these in their interview. That's why we put it on the top there. So I think we now conclude all the talks and presentation. I would now like to invite Mr. Mohammed Mukhtar, who's a assistant professor anesthesiology and consultant anesthesiology in UCD and St. Vincent and INER Hospital, and he has also wide experience on these interviews, and he can help us to just communicate and conduct a panel discussion. Over to you, Mr. Mukhtar.
Thanks, Mr. Khalid, and thanks to all the speakers for both sessions 1 and session 2. I think it was an excellent presentation, to be honest. Very little left for me to add on, but just 2 or 3 general comments, please. So I think the trainees, there's a huge number of people who are attending the live webinar, I think they can be at different levels and can be the, at the beginner level, SHOs can be applying for the training schemes or can apply for the consultant. And the people who recently came from Pakistan or other part of the world, and in the beginning, I think it's a kind of honeymoon period. People will allow them and look after them in the beginning. They can understand the system, and other people who are coming from abroad with experience, still in their first job, there will be a lot of sympathy because they're new in the system there. But then time clicks on, and they have to improve, and they have to be part of the system and learn as quickly as possible, rather than after 1 year, still if they can say, I'm new in the system, it will not be taken on. That's one thing which I come across is very, very valid. And second thing, I always give the advice, I sit on the boards like a training scheme as even for the consultant interviews. And I think when people who are the seniors enough, when they look at the CV, and if last 1 year on my CV is only the service job, it take me nowhere, And if I have done the fellowship, if I have finished the scheme, during the schemes, they're looking for what else I have done it, whether I have done masters in the other teaching, or I have done PhD, or I have done something else which can improve your CV. So if people can divide during the SHO what they have done, during the training scheme, how they progress, they prepare themselves for the consultant, and if they're doing the temporary consultant job, and during that one, they have to show them they are, excellent colleague to be appointed as a colleague for the permanent role there. And last but not the least thing is, and research is the people that are not good in the research, and the clinical experience. And as I said, the people move from one hospital to another hospital, week or 2 weeks, they will be, given the, permission that they're new in that hospital, but then the people's expectation goes up and up. And I think that's from me, and I really appreciate it. It was excellent, a lot of learning for me as well. And I think we can open, a lot of questions has been answered in the chat box, but if people have the question, we are happy to answer. Thank you.
That's fine. Good, Mukhtar. Excellent. I just start a few questions coming, but one question to Professor Gillen and the rest of the panel there. Anybody can answer. Commonly, future plan we write down, and people are afraid, especially people coming from abroad. Once they train, what they should answer if they are asked, "What's your future plan?"
So if somebody, just so as I'm clear on the question, so if somebody is coming from abroad and is asked what's their future plan at an interview, is that correct, Khalid?
That's correct. Once they are in the system and they just want to be getting a little more training, good training, and what way you think you are expecting answers from the people coming from abroad in the training system here?
Okay, so in my experience, a lot of people from abroad initially will take any job in order to gain employment and keep themselves salaried, and that's very understandable. But as the previous speaker just said, that's all right for maybe the first year, but then you should have a career plan. You should decide what you want to do. So if you want to become a surgeon, then you should know what is required. So as the two trainees, Adil and Mustafa, said, the earlier you find out what you need to get under your belt to get ahead, the better. So familiarize yourself with the system. Every year, you should try to get something better on your CV, like an abstract, a presentation, or if you can at all, a publication every year. You should get the courses, as Mustafa and Adil had said. Then your aim is, when is my first exam? Do the exam as quickly as possible. Try and get the things on your CV, the building blocks in order to be a surgeon. So find out what you need and then attack that with gusto, as it were, and try and get the things under your belt. So that each job you then apply for has to progress your CV and your career. So if I see somebody coming who's done 6 months in emergency medicine, followed by 6 months in psychiatry, followed by 6 months in pediatrics, and is now applying for a surgical post, I question where that person's commitment to a career is. So, do they want to be in emergency medicine? Do they want to do psychiatry? So, for example, you must have a clear path in your own mind and then work towards it and get all the building blocks early. As Mustafa said, try and get moving early. Find out what is going to make you successful. So, speak to people who've been successful and talk to trainers in the system. So if people are on interview boards or on panels, they know what's required.
That's good. Excellent, Professor. If anybody want to put more on this, they're welcome. But I just move on to a second question, if open to all panels, is because people we come from abroad, most of the time they're a little older than the local graduates, and how to deal this, or in other words, is age has any effect or any factor in applying for training schemes?
It's a interesting one. Although on paper there is no age restriction and nobody is going to discriminate one over the other on the basis of their age. But then you have to be realistic that, for an example, in NHS, it's an unwritten criteria for surgical specialties, at least, that any person who is appointed should be able to provide service to the NHS for the next 25 years. But if you are appointing a person who you see that they would retire or will only be providing service to maybe 10 or 15 years, then there will be a question to think that in a training program, the government is spending money on you to be trained. So are you going to be productive enough to provide back to the system what the system is investing on you? And then you will have an answer. So it, there are unfortunately certain things which cannot be put on paper, but pragmatic thinking would indicate otherwise.
Thanks, Shabi. This next question came that if somebody is slow to progress in the beginning, but how to overcome, especially some new doctor wasted 4 years. Anybody want to take this question?
Sorry, Mr. Aslam want to answer first. I think he want to give the comments. Please, Mr. Aslam, go ahead.
Okay, sorry, I didn't see that. Sorry, yeah.
Okay, but that's precisely what we are doing today. So it doesn't matter if you have spent time and when you were not sure what you wanted to do, but now you need to define and you need to set a goal, what you want to achieve. You need to look at your core competencies and you need to go seek advice and help. And if that's where, and that's also, I want to come to the first question was that if somebody had come from another system and they are in their middle or senior years, but it all depends. If somebody actually did work in a particular specialty in 4 or 5 years in a developing country, they might have actually huge amount of exposure to a particular field in terms of, let's say, general surgery or other. So there can be strengths and weaknesses. However, it's important that nobody is discouraged that, oh, well, you're 6 or 7 or 8 years downstream. No, it should matter. So as long as people then can define and say what is realistically available to them, what they can realistically achieve, and then they should be able to competitively enter into that.
And anyone, just to answer the next question, it's about a candidate who's not successful, and if he thinks that his interview was not taken inappropriately, or he thinks it's bias.
In a structured interview, whenever you are assessing anyone, you have a chart in front of you in which you are marking the person, and you score as per the requirements of the job and as per the advertisement, as well as the the criteria which the candidate is fulfilling. So it is very easy to feed back to the person with the chart in front of you and the marks you give them, that although they might in their minds have thought that they have done well, but you will score them as per the answers they gave you and as per what they have put in their CVs or in their applications. So again, structured interview is the key to protect the examining panel as well.
Okay, now from the Ireland perspective.
Yeah, from the RCPI, it is a structured. Obviously there's an independent chair. There's an RCPI administrator. The paperwork is all kept. There's feedback. All candidates are offered feedback. If they want feedback afterwards, if they're unsuccessful. But yeah, there's a set marking system. So at any stage, if somebody's unsuccessful, we will always, usually the national specialty director will liaise with them, and they can get a breakdown of the scores and where they went wrong or were unsuccessful. But I think it's very important to stress that in certain specialties, it is extremely competitive, and you're looking at year on year on year, it's getting even harder because we now have graduate entry coming in as well, and these people are often quite driven because they've gone into training a bit older, they're a bit more mature, they know what they want, they tend to go and get qualifications or whatever is needed to get onto the next level. So the standard, I'm always astounded by the standard of the people applying to the SBR schemes every year. So even for be that somebody who's trained, who's from the US or Canada, Pakistan, India, Ireland, Europe, it is difficult no matter what to get on a training scheme in certain specialties.
That's very good. Now, before we move, there are a few questions, but one reminder to all participants, because to get this 2 external CPD point, you need to fill the feedback form. That feedback form has attendance as well, and that's the way you can claim those CPD points from RCSI. Otherwise, you may not be able to claim. So please do fill the feedback, and so we can communicate and give you and the RCSI can award you CPD points. Now, next question is, somebody asked if someone want or just do a fellowship abroad, does it increase the chance for that doctor to get a higher surgical training scheme in UK and Ireland?
Again, it depends on the on the particular job and its requirements. In certain specialities, additional qualification is appreciated. However, there is a balance between the amount of experience a person has. Certain specialities, for example, orthopedics in UK does not allow persons with a certain level of experience to apply because they are considered overqualified. So it again, it's a fine balance.
That's fine. I think I'll take David, your opinion. If somebody come and do a fellowship already somewhere and come for higher surgical training.
So the points and the scoring system for higher surgical training are all available online, and they're very specific, and they have a time window. And things from, say, 10 years ago, a fellowship that's very old, for example, doesn't help you in the scoring system. It might help you in your ability, and it might project well at an interview, but it probably isn't going to. You'd have to, in this sort of setting here, we were told an international fellowship, so we'd need to know what that means, how long it is, how long ago it was, and the verification and logbook and things like that would all come into it. So I think it's difficult to get a reward for a fellowship like that if you're going for HST post, probably. But it's all transparent, it's all online, scoring stuff is there, but it really is built around, in truth, the idea that you run through from university through core surgical training and on to HST. And while there is equivalent channels to it, the equivalent channels are benchmarked, if you will, off what a core surgical trainee would do. So, and it's in a sort of similar time window. So, I suppose one question would be, why would someone with an international fellowship and especially want to go back to the beginning of higher surgical 6-year training program, to be honest with you? So if your international training fellowship was that good, then why would you need to go back to year one?
Fair point. Fair point. Thanks very much. I think we are already late, and we'll move on to the next. And anybody want more questions, they can email, and it's not a guarantee, but we'll try if you can pass on to the panelists, and we can then communicate. So I'll hand over back to Dr. Malik Maqsood to do a concluding remarks and finish the session. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Khalid. So I think it's been great. It's been excellent. First of all, there hasn't been any technical glitches, and we have been able to complete the webinar in a nice fashion. That is a great thing. And huge thanks to our IT team, which has been behind the scene and ensuring that we are able to convey to the participants whatever we wanted to tell them. So especially, I would really like to thank Zubair Siddiqui and Sayyid Asif Ali, Khalid Abbas, and Faisal Mirza to make this whole event possible. Without their help and support, it would not have been possible. I can assure you, none of us can claim to be tech savvy and be able to run this so smoothly. So huge applause for all of them. Secondly, I would like to thank all the speakers for their time and effort. I know everybody's very busy, and the interest they all showed in this webinar. And thankfully, as you can see, the attendance has been more than 50% of the registration. Usually it's about 1/3 of the people they join. In the end, what I would like to say to everyone, including the speakers, that if they could fill up the feedback form, because that is first of all required to send them their CPD credits and also the attendance certificate and certificates of appreciation to our speakers. And thanks especially to Professor Gillen, who made it possible at a very short notice that we were able to get accreditation and for the CPD with the RCSI. And with all that, I would like to conclude this session and thank you all. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.